Hello, everyone. This is Monet Zayed again. Welcome back to Medical Arabic. Thank you for joining us today. So moving on through the patient interview, today we're going to be covering more about medical history. So we'll cover adult illnesses, health screenings, immunizations, and childhood illnesses. And it really will only be a brief overview. We're obviously not going to cover all of the adult or childhood illnesses that one can get, just some of the more common ones that you'll see on the day-to-day basis. So first up, for medical history, have you had any current illnesses? So I'll break it up section by section. Have you had is fi عندك, any is a, current is حاليا, current حاليا, and illnesses is أمراض. So في عندك أي أمراض حاليا? Have you had any current illnesses? Next up is, have you been hospitalized before? So hospitalized is, you can say, so for example, hospital is mustashfa. We've covered that in the past. So hospitalized is دخلت المشفى or دخلت المستشفى. That's hospitalized. من قبل or من قبل, depending on your dialect, is before. We've covered that in the past as well. And then have you been, that's just implied in دخلت. That means have you been hospitalized. So to say it completely, دخلت المشفى من قبل, or you can say دخلت المستشفى من قبل or من قبل. Now we'll cover some common adult illnesses that you'll hear, especially with Arabic-speaking patients. First up is diabetes. Diabetes is el-sukkari. So fun fact, sukkar means sugar in Arabic. It's also similar to Spanish as well. Azúcar means sugar in Spanish. So sukkar, you can think of having lots of sugar in your blood. So diabetes is el-sukkari. Next up is hypertension. The word is ضغط دم عالي. So it's actually three words. So when you say blood pressure, you say ضغط الدم. So ضغط literally means pressure, dam means blood, and عالي means high. So in reality, this means high blood pressure. So ضغط دم عالي is hypertension. Asthma is ربو. Asthma is ربو. And lastly is cancer. Cancer is saratan. Saratan, cancer. Continuing on with medical history, if you remember, our word of the year is waja, is pain. Waja is pain. Sadr means chest. Waja sadr means chest pain. And just to specify, sometimes people say sadr is breast, but in general, in this context, you would say waja sadr. That generally means chest pain. Heart attack is jalta qalbiya. So heart itself means qalb or elb, depending on your dialect. So qalbiya is, I guess, the adjective form of heart. And then jalta, it means any sort of clot. So in this case, it's almost like it's saying it's a heart clot, but in colloquial terms, it's a heart attack. So jalta qalbiya or jalta albiya is heart attack. Shortness of breath is dik tanafus or di tanafus, depending on your dialect. If you remember, like that heavy Q or K sound can be dropped depending on your dialect. So dik means tightness or shortness, and then tanafus means breathing. So shortness of breath is di tanafus. To smoke or smoking is tadkhin. Tadkhin. Again, sometimes it can be hard for non-native speakers to say that kha sound. Just pretend that you're trying to get something out of your throat. So tadkhin is smoking. Continuing on with medical history, obesity is badana. Very short and sweet, badana, obesity. Next up is glucose level. This one's fun because glucose, there isn't like a full Arabic word for it. So you just say glucose, or el-glucose means the glucose. And then nisbat means level. You could use that for any sort of lab value if you want to say level. Nisbat el-glucose is glucose level. Next up is anemia. So if you remember, the word for blood when we were talking about high blood pressure is dem. In this case, it's fakr dem. Fakr means poverty. So a poverty of blood is the concept of anemia. So fakr dem or fatr dem, depending on your dialect, is anemia. And the easiest word, cholesterol, is cholesterol. There isn't really an Arabic word for it. So if you see an Arabic speaking patient, they'll understand you if you just say cholesterol. All right, moving on to health screenings now. Have you had health screenings recently? I'll go through each part separately. So wait is have you had or have you done? Health screenings. So health tabiya is like the adjective describing screenings, is health. And then fuhusat means screening. So fuhusat tabiya means health screenings. And recently means min jadid. Min jadid is recently. So overall is sawait fuhusat tabiya min jadid. Now, if you want to ask the patient on what health screenings they wanted to do, you would say fahast. Fahast is have you checked, and then you'd fill in the blank based on what you want to know. So a little bit of review from what we just covered. Blood pressure is ضغط الدم. ضغط is pressure, الدم is blood. Except same word. Again, we spell them a bit differently just because it's direct translation from how it's spelled to Arabic versus how it's pronounced. So it's just the same word, it's just spelled a bit differently when you move it to the English version. So al-dam is blood, sukkar al-dam is blood sugar. Sukkar al-dam. Next up, you can say fahast cholesterol. So have you checked cholesterol? Fahast cholesterol. Have you checked blood pressure? Is fahast ضغط الدم. Have you checked blood sugar? Is fahast sukkar الدم. Continuing on about immunizations. So have you gotten vaccines? The word for vaccines is lukah. Singular is lukah. So if you look at the second part, is just one vaccine, lukah. If you say vaccines, plural, is lukahat, lukahat, lukahat. And then if you want to say your vaccines, is lukahatak, lukahatak. So if you want to say have you gotten your vaccines, is achat, is have you gotten. And then have you gotten vaccines would be achat lukahatak. If you want to be more specific, for example, the flu vaccine, to say flu, it's el-rash, el-rash. If you hear that heavy H sound, the airy H sound. So remember, like I talked about before, if you see them in the Coke commercials, they say ah, after they drink the Coke. So think about that sound. El-rash. So lukah is vaccine. Achat is have you gotten or have you taken. So achat, lukah, el-rash. All right, we're going to go through some flu symptoms. So just because it was related to our flu vaccine discussion. So flu, like I said before, is rash, rash, with that sort of airy H sound at the end. Next up is sore throat. We've covered throat in the past as well. So throat is halak or zor, depending on which you can choose either. You can say halak or halak, depending on your dialect. And some people also say zor, zor. And then waja is pain again. Pain and soreness can kind of be used interchangeably. Waja halak or waja zor is how you say sore throat. Next up, headache. Waja again is pain. And if you remember a few sessions ago, we talked about the parts of the body. So head is ras, So in total, headache is waja ras. Next up is cough. Cough, you can also say it two ways. You can say sala, sala, or koha, or kaha. So I guess three ways. You can say sala or kaha. I personally say koha. Cough is koha or sala. And lastly, like we covered in the last session in our little story about Med Global, fever is harara. Harara. Like you start with that airy H sound and then you sort of roll your R's to get the next part. Harara, fever. Now, if we move on to ask our patients about childhood illnesses, you'd want to say كان عندك أمراض طفولة. كان عندك is have you had. أمراض is illnesses. And then طفولة means childhood. كان عندك أمراض طفولة. Have you had any childhood illnesses? And then here are a handful of some common childhood illnesses. Asthma is rabu. Rabu is asthma. Ear inflammation. So to say inflammation, you say iltihab, and that works across the board. Iltihab. Iltihab is inflammation, and then ear, if you remember from our past session, is udhun. Ear is udhun. So to say ear inflammation or even ear infection, you say iltihab udhun. Next up is measles. Measles is hasba. Hasba. Measles is hasba. And lastly is chickenpox, which is judri. Judri, chickenpox. All right, yeah, feel free to pause and review, go through any of the words that were challenging for you. Just keep practicing, and we're grateful to have you all join us during this session. Thank you so much. See you next time.